good afternoon, and if you're watching this on release day in the morning as I intended, good morning. I'm the artist presently known as Zan Truluck, and this week we're going to do something a little bit different in what I like to call a masterpiece studio. So typically you hear me come in here or previously at the fireside chats. It's always a stream of consciousness, which it will still be today. It's one take. There is no editing after the scenes except for just editing together different pieces of the same footage. But typically I come in here and talk about canvas painted artwork. And as I've been launching more into my personal brand and my clothing line and my website, I think it's important to note that my clothes, it's just wearable art. My prints are hangable art, and accessories is basically just art that you can accessorize. So my drop model on a monthly basis is all based on giving you different ways to consume my art. So make no mistake, my t-shirts, are my art. So today we're going to talk about the thoughts behind my Monopoly Man design. It fits within the series that I did and am doing called Representation Matters. And specifically, this one was from the Gems from a Jeweler series. And under this originally was the phrase, pay it forward. When I used this for this design that you see here presently, the Refund Black America t-shirt that I released, it was all about this idea of what it means to truly have a monopoly, who holds the power of many of the monopolies in this world. There are so many thoughts behind just in general the way that we've consumed media over my lifetime, certainly over my mom and dad's lifetime, and even prior to that from this lens of a white mainstream America. And when I was thinking of all of those things, I get to the Monopoly Man, whose name is actually Uncle Pennybags. And I thought about just how Milton Bradley, well, presently Milton Bradley, I think formerly it was Parker Brothers, built this game around just ownership and what ownership really meant. And then I was thinking about the lack of Black ownership we have in this nation, the lack of Black representation paired with that. And truthfully, I just felt like it was time for us to get our piece. It's long been time for us to get our piece. But when you think about the most prized spots on Monopoly, and everyone has different strategies, I also designed this, and I'll show you in a second, to represent a card, which was originally, so it's the Black Wall Street card, but originally I had it colored blue to fit within the set of Broadway and Park Place. So the highest earning places on that board. Now we know there are different strategies of whether or not you would buy those two properties and how probable you are to land there. But as a people, we barely ever even get the pass go in this nation. So I continue to think about, how do I represent Monopoly in a way that reflects us? How do I do something that gives me the appropriate commentary on what I truly believe about our capitalist society? And then fitting within the canon of these jewels and gems from a jeweler that I've released in my series, how would I really explain this to a younger generation as I recontextualize all of these characters that at one time were just completely white? How would that look to a generation that rises up and knows nothing but the Black characters, perhaps? And that was something someone brought up to me that I wasn't even thinking of at the time, that this artwork that I'm doing could quite possibly be the first time that your children consume these images. And whereas when we were children, we had to consume them and jump for joy when we had a character that looked like us, now we get it where if this is in your home, their first introduction to the Monopoly Man, to Pinocchio, to Angelica from Rugrats is a Black image. Just, I mean, again, to that concept of just imagery and iconography, what if the first image of Jesus you were introduced to was a Jesus that looked like you? How would that feel? So as I was going through those thoughts of representation, as I'm going through how I would maximize the Blackness of the Monopoly Man, a lot of people simply take skin tone and change it. But Blackness is not simply just the amount of melanin in your skin. I wanted to take it and make it a little more cultural than that. I wanted to give him Ankara print pants. I wanted to give him a cane that actually had significance to our people. So when I took the idea of the Sankofa and thought about what I'm trying to represent within just what's owed to Black America. So the refund is returning the money, the debts that we've already paid, give us back what we've already invested and sown into this company. So with the idea of the Sankofa and going back for it and learning from the past, I wanted to make sure that that was something that I represented here with my Uncle Pennybags. And I didn't even give him a name yet, so we're just going to call him Brother Monopoly Man, Monopoly Brother. See, I think on the fly there. So the thought of refunding Black America is obviously a case for reparations, but then I wanted to take that thought and put a different spin on it. So literally, I'm going to spin this now. And specifically, I thought about the debt owed to those individuals who are descendants of the Tulsa race riot, the Tulsa massacre, and what happened in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And those individuals, in general, what happened there has been something that has always been on my mind, especially as I think about what it means to be a Black owner. What does Black ownership look like? And why that's something so strongly to be feared. And then also pressing that up against these concepts that I have of how we can be more communal as a people. And I just rested in this Black Wall Street thought in the space of, you had a community that was self-sustaining and thriving, yet there was a person on the other side and there were people on the other side who just could not take looking at Black people thriving in that way, Black people sustaining without their dollar needing to be on the white grid or on the mainstream American grid, that is. And you had people that were simply disgusted by it. They didn't want you to be able to feed yourselves. They didn't want you to farm. They didn't want you to have Black dentists, Black doctors, store owners, just the idea of your dollar circulating through your community before it ever touches theirs, and how many times that dollar can circulate through your community. It disgusted them. Now, in college, I was an economics student, and in my last year in Morehouse, I did a senior paper for my urban economics course, and it was about the two mutually exclusive economies that happen in Brooklyn, New York. So specifically Crown Heights, Brooklyn, that is. So we have an Orthodox Jewish community that sits right within the same space as the Black community and mainly Afro-Caribbean community there in Brooklyn, yet the economies operate exclusive of one another. And you have a Brooklyn Children's Museum maybe 5 blocks away from the actual Jewish Children's Museum. So again, they have a museum even that operates in a completely different capacity to teach them about their history, which we lack in our community so often. They have their own police force. They have their dollar circulates through their community so many times where it never has to leave. They developed all of these items for themselves in these stores, and just all services and goods that they possibly could need, for the most part, come from their own community. They have their own buses. And I don't mean public transportation buses, but their own school buses. And all of these things are just, and they have their own schools. All of these things they built for themselves within their community. And that dollar really doesn't have to leave. So when we think about how many times your dollar could circulate through our Black community, when we look at the idea, if I'm buying my food from a Black farmer, and then that food I take and feed my family with. My family goes out and has enough energy to go and work a job that they're working to get that Black dollar, and then the goods and services that they pay for go to other individuals who are Black. When you think about ownership and the land, and if your dollar was going through someone, so if you paid rent to someone and that landlord happened to be a Black homeowner or own that building as a Black person, that rent goes to them. Their dollar then goes to other areas within our community. It could circulate about 15 to 16 times before it ever has to touch America's hands. And I think when you really think, I mean, even the electorate, so if you're paying taxes on the land itself, should that land be owned by America? Does America really have claim to that land? When we're really talking about the refunds and how America has come and stolen that land from the native, at the end of the day, your dollar goes to someone who came and stole this land. So when we talk about the concept of Black liberation, which I will continue to expand upon, and at least my thoughts on Black liberation, when we talk about the items that will bring us to liberation, you have with land, with banks being able to finance ourselves. I mean, we all know that we've heard recently, fortunately I'll say, but it was really something that was swept under the rug, is the amount of Black banks that are actually existing nowadays, and how many people don't put their dollars in our Black banks. And when you think about the schools, I mean, Black educators are now being highlighted, fortunately, in the light of COVID. But when you see the disparities that they have even within education, their access in order to become leaders within the school. So there's one thing to be a teacher, but to be faculty, to be an administrator there, and there are gaps within that system also. When we look at food security itself, back to farming, subsistence living, our access to food, the diets that our children have on the summertime, whether it's the fact that they're not getting food because they usually get their meals through the schools, or it's the fact that they're just eating poor diets when you're living in destitution. I know when I was a kid, my summers were spent eating beef patties with cheese and cocoa bread and slices of pizza. My vegetables were really coming from burgers while I was running the streets. Like, I wasn't eating whole meals. And then what does that do to your ability to perform in these schools that we don't own, but we need to be owning? When we talk about just ownership in general, having a piece of that land, a piece of that area in which you sit, where you can actually say, hey, I have this to pass down generationally to my children. Yes, your dollar is going to go to a landlord if you don't own it, but at the end of the day, that landlord is still taken care of and spending within our community. How many times can that dollar revolve and circulate within hands and exchange hands in our community before it really needs to exit? And when we talk about how scary that is, how you have a community in Black Wall Street where everyone is completely spinning within their own, and they didn't want us to have anything like that. It was so terrifying that they had to come and burn it down. Yet, and this is not at all a cry to burn anything down. I need you to understand that and do not take this out of context. Why is it okay for that Orthodox Jewish community in Crown Heights to have that, and America allows that to exist, but we don't have that for ourselves? When it existed, they wanted to tear it down. When it exists and people have, after white flight to suburbia has happened and they've exited the cities and then they see the city start thriving and it's land that they want to get again, why is it that people come in and gentrify the neighborhoods and then push us out? It just is a thing where we have to really evaluate how we spend our dollar. We have to understand the purchasing power parity of our dollar, know how much we spend as a consumer base and how much we could actually spend with ourselves. We don't support Black brands enough. There are so many multi-layered issues within how we can actually go about fixing this, of course, and it would take years for us to really peel back, but it starts with spending your dollar with your people. It starts with supporting Black businesses, and this is not at all a cry for you to buy my shirt. Been blessed enough for that to actually sell out, and I have a couple sizes left, and hopefully by the time this video releases, they will be sold out. This is a cry for us to band together as a people and really understand how we can use our dollar more effectively if we are going to play in the capitalist system to begin with. When you think about the idea of the Montgomery bus boycotts and that thought of hitting them in their pockets, when we talk about walkouts for athletes, when we talk about athletes actually going to play at HBCUs and getting off of a system that does not support us as Black students in the way we should be supported, our ability to spend our dollars with our people is so broad and so grand, but we just don't think about it. It starts so small. I mean, even how do we get off of the Amazon grid? And it comes with understanding that small businesses necessarily won't give you the same amount of convenience, but then you should be looking for a higher level of service from that small business. And when you don't receive that level of service, why not give feedback? Feedback is a gift. Like some people call it feed forward. I'm giving this to you, so moving forward, you will know how to perform better and serve your customer base in a certain way. We just need to give our people so much more of ourselves and just stop looking at it as if it's a hassle to deal with Blackness. You've been dealing with Blackness your whole life. It's something that you will deal with for the rest of your life, and understand that it's something to be revered and valued. So I've got a lot more to say about all types of my clothing, but I really wanted to focus on the idea that my clothing is not just an article of apparel. It really is something that I'm coming to you all with, that I've been putting a lot of thought behind. It's giving you my images that I've spent hours thinking on, just like I think about my paintings, conceiving the architecture for how I'm going to execute the painting itself, or excuse me, the illustration itself, thinking about how the composition needs to play off of the next one, even how it fits on a shirt. There are design elements there, and I'm giving you my artwork. On this tee, I gave you 2 different versions of my artwork, actually, and then also it's a conversation piece. So I want to come through that authentically. Every time I deliver something, I am delivering to you the level of thought that I would put into anything else. So this has been Masterpiece Studio. This has been a different look of it this week. And I am the artist presently known as Zan Truluck. Thank you for joining. Have a good Saturday morning.